One of the biggest advantages that you can levy when it comes to the way that you operate in life as well as at work is the development of an inquisitive mind. So specifically, what do I mean by that? I mean your ease with which you're able to ask intelligent questions, okay? And there's a lot of tropes that exist online about the level at which you can judge a person's intelligence is by the measure of the questions that they ask. And of course, that's then where you can, if you're the person asking the questions, extract really useful information. So, in the context of business, that's where in a sales environment, you find out all of the initiatives that a client might have. That's when in a sales environment, you discover the particular nuances and details to the campaign that your prospect is thinking about launching. In a client relationship management environment, that's where you find out, again, similar questions about a client's overall budget, challenges that they have internally, who are the various additional stakeholders, and so on and so forth. There's lots of discoveries that you can make. And it's very revealing. And one of the ways that you can test as to whether, if you're a business owner, whether your team have it, I talk about this a lot in our team meetings, is what questions do people have? And I'll more often than I would like get met with a room full of silence. And it does then have an impact on the way that people think about things because I see that people don't by default have questions and develop the thinking mind and get into that place where having an attention for detail is the norm because that's demonstrated by the level of questions that you'll ask. So I think that one of the ways, if you're looking to develop that, and it will have an impact on your life, it will have an impact on your career, it will have an impact upon absolutely everything that you do professionally as well as personally. If I think about the development of an inquisitive mind, I see, for example, personally, that by judging the way that people approach things and the way that they explain things, I get a sense of how detail oriented they're going to be. And but more often than not, I will then assume the management of a lot of tasks that happen within my personal life because I'll see that, okay, I can see by the lack of detail that's being paid here that it's better that me or one of my team take things over. So practically, you need to just be in the habit of I forget the name of the gentleman who talks about this a lot, but be in the space of forcing yourself to ask questions every day in all areas of your life. Number one. Number two, when I talk so when I talk about asking questions, a lot of it also relates to getting specific insight on things. So practically when people will say to you as an example, I will update you later, I would always say, okay, well, what time will you update me later? And then when people give you an update, you want to get into the habit of asking about the technical detail of things just so that you can understand. Elon Musk often talks about him being, I mean, there's two examples. So Alex Hormozy, more recently, I watched a video, and one of the things he talks about is that when he wants to learn something, he'll go and he'll interview in a new space he's unaware of up to 15 people. Think about that. 15 interviews with 15 subject matter experts to know what to understand the detail of things. So one of the ways also that you develop an inquisitive mind, of course, is that reservoir of knowledge that you build. One of the ways that you can do that comes from reading. The more that you know, the more that you'll learn to also understand things, and the more that you'll begin to perhaps have the ability to question some of the things that you are exposed to, because then you'll get exposure to competing narratives. If you've only read one sales book, you'll say that this is the way, but then someone else will say, this is a different way. So one of the things, just to give you an example of it, one of the, I would call it deep inconsistencies of one of the things that Alex Hormozy says, he talks about the problem of focus that people have. So he'll say, okay, great, I did gym launch, I did Alan, I did gym launch, and then I had my nutritional supplements that I developed, like protein shake for gyms, and then I developed a software company, but my problem was focus. But what he's doing right now, for me, runs massively counter to that because he's literally developed a company called acquisition.com where he buys multiple different companies. So that's multiple different strands of focus. So for me, that undercuts a lot of what he says. And then also, he's developing a personal brand. So you see it with the investment he's made with School, which is a competitor, if you will, to group-led communities. Then he's got acquisition. So I'm able to make that deduction because of my exposure to competing narratives, and I'm able to see the inconsistencies within what someone says. So it's really, really important to have an inquisitive mind because then you can think deeply about and one of the other elements to it, of course, is like mechanically an easy level, get used to being detail oriented. So always ask for timelines, always ask for very specific updates, always seek to learn the thing or extract as much value from the way that someone does something as you can. So I like to know how absolutely everything is done because it frustrates me when I don't know the specifics of things because I think that, well, I lose in this context, and then you're able to add value and offer additional insight. So I think that doing that is really, really important. I think that reading the type of literature that will cause you to develop the inquisitive mind is really important. So one of the other things that I spoke about, so number one, I'm at a dinner table where we always ask questions, and I'm the kind of person, as I've got older, I speak less, unless you watch my YouTube videos and you think I fucking speak all the time. But I speak less and I listen more and I ask a lot of questions. If you ever spent any time with me and Daniela, I don't talk much. If you ever spend some time with me in parties or in my personal life, I'm very different in that I just spend most of my time listening. I don't say much. I like to listen. I like to learn because I'm interested in everything that I can learn from those who are around me. So that's a practical way to do it. Ask a lot more questions at work. Get used to building it into your consciousness, and then it becomes a function of muscle memory. When anyone ever tells you, I'm going to work on something, and you don't know the mechanics of it, say, can you just show me how it works? Always, always. There should never be something that you don't at least get some rudimentary knowledge of. I don't like things that I'm exposed to when I don't understand, which is why when, for example, our web development team will run things by me, Charles, he'll sometimes say, oh, deep, this is a lot of detail. And I say, it's not a problem. I want to understand the detail of things. And then sometimes I'll jump onto ChatGPT to understand what is an XMRPC vulnerability that exists within WordPress websites and how that can affect ultimately page load times because of the amount of API requests that can be exposed to that input because of that being needed to remotely execute tasks within a WordPress framework that is typically generated by use of third-party platforms that are used to run multi-site WordPress setups. So the fact that I'm able to articulate that will, of course, then give me a distinct competitive advantage when I go into an environment where I'm selling. And one of the things that I often talk about is that the way that you can easily distinguish yourself is your ability to articulate things that are technical, because the relational side of client-facing work is actually the easier thing. It's not that hard to be fucking friendly. It's a bit more difficult to be able to read from the textbook. And that ability to read from the textbook and understand the technical nature of things comes from having the inquisitive mind. And you can then also try and just read shit that you don't understand. One of the things that I studied at university as well as at my A levels was philosophy. Everything was abstract. Everything was about inductive reasoning and thinking about, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. What does that mean? What is this concept of the ghost in the machine? So there's different ways to ultimately build that level of having an inquisitive mind. And I think that people don't think about this and don't work upon it. But then I do believe that you lose at work. One of the things that I spoke about in one of our sales groups is that Mark Cuban talks about, and his book, Mark Cuban, Billionaire, uh, one of the few people that actually, and in this book, he speaks about it. It's ironic. A lot of people will know Mark Cuban from Shark Tank, from owning, I think, the Mavericks. Like he owns a football team, I believe, and he is regularly investing in other companies. But if you read his actual, let's call it, I don't know if he's released any books since, but if we call How to Win at the Sport of Business his business manifesto, he says he's anti-raising money. He says that most companies don't lack resources; they lack intelligence. And he says that people just don't think about things deeply enough. And he said that one of the ways that he differentiated himself, same thing with Steve Jobs, by the way, when they went into a sales environment, was that he'd be the only person who'd be on the sales floor that had read the actual literature, like the handbook for how, for example, a particular machine operates. So then your ability to understand that comes from your ability to absorb information. So talk less, listen more, ask a million questions about everything all of the time, and your ability to learn things will and to develop that inquisitive mind will grow. Again, another example, Elon Musk. Read about his history, and you'll see that his prodigious ability to learn stems from he would literally spend an hour just firing hundreds of questions. I say hundreds, but probably dozens of questions about any area within which he hired someone for something that he didn't completely understand because he says, I want to know. And that's how he learned to, as they talk about quite popularly, how he learned to send rockets into the sky because he read all of the books, then he hired all of the best people, and then he kept asking them questions until he thought that that had been exhausted. So think about this when it comes to your roles within business, your roles within work, and it will make an absolute difference. And you will see it by your ability to grasp seemingly complex pieces of information, but also you'll begin to spot things and begin to develop inconsistencies because your ability to spot inconsistencies and to spot problems rests upon the knowledge that you have and your ability to interact with that knowledge. And that comes from listening. That comes from having an inquisitive mind by asking question upon question. And that's by building the ultimately inquisitive mind by also reading things that are difficult, as well as potentially practicing role play and debating and working specifically on areas within which you are weak.